afternoon, all again. So we have come here with the last session of today, and I'm so happy to have with us Dr. Gaurang Shah. I'm so honored to welcome you, sir. Sir is currently working as a professor in LM College of Pharmacy. He joined LM College of Pharmacy in June 2016. Earlier, he worked at KB Institute of Pharmaceutical Education and Research right from its genesis in August 1995 as a lecturer and progressed to the level of principal of the institute. He have academic experience spread over 25 years. Along with the teaching, learning, and administrative responsibilities, he have keen interest in research. He has guided more than 50 graduate students and 8 PhD students in their work. We have executed more than 50 acute, subacute, dermal, and ocular industrial studies of drug formulation for national and international regulatory submissions. We have also conducted 12 industry-sponsored pharmacodynamic studies of drug formulation in the area of CNS, cardiovascular, hematological, and respiratory disease. We have undertaken special training in animal handling in bioresearch at IISc Bangalore and also have been trained on good clinical practices and ethics in clinical and animal research. Presently, he is the board of studies at various universities. He has been invited as a speaker at various conferences and workshops. We have also developed facilities for in vitro animal cell culture studies at KB Institute of Pharmaceutical Education and Research and has actively worked in discovery of new anti-cancer agents from natural sources such as herbal and microorganisms. We have been a consultant to various pharmaceutical industries and have supported their research-based development projects. Sir, we have been so grateful to have you with us. Over to you, sir, for preceding the session and enlighten us with the topic entitled Designing Toxicological Study for Pharmaceutical and Data Interpretation.
Thank you, Priyanshi, for a wonderful introduction of mine.
Pleasure is mine, sir.
And I also thank the SSR College, Dr. Sanjeev Acharya and his team, and even Chirag Bhai for giving me this opportunity to be with you all in presenting some of my ideas with respect to the guidelines which are there. And since last I am at the almost at the center point of the program, and at this stage I am being asked to talk on the designing of the toxicological studies for pharmaceuticals and its data interpretation. I'm not here to present all the details regarding how these studies are to be designed and how individual data has to be interpreted, because it's a long science and it's going to take up a lot of time for it. But most of this data are available online, methodologies are available, softwares are available. But what I am trying to point out is how we can analyze this data in a specific conditions and in specific situations and come out with some good outcomes of the study. So just to start with, something I would like to go with the initial statements provided by the keynote address, I think, by Dr. Y.K. Gupta, that the SOPs are brought into the life of a person right from our childhood. Right? Mothers try to say that you need to brush at 6 a.m. in the morning and then do this and then do that and then go for breakfast and etc. 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 So in continuation with that line, the SOPs are created in our mind, though it's not on paper, they are created in mind. At the same time, with the evolution of our life, as we become elder, when we grow with our age, what happens is we find that getting up at 6 a.m. becomes difficult. So we modify our SOPs. That whenever I get up, hello, I'm audible?
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
you are audible.
So whenever I get up, I would do the toothbrush. Instead of 6 a.m., I'm now changing my SOP to whenever I get up. So like this, the SOPs change, and then it changes to the level that before breakfast, I should do it. The purpose was that I should clean my mouth before putting anything else in my mouth. But with time, this purpose gets lost, and therefore, we require SOPs which are to be fixed and finalized. But before I go forward, one thing I would like to put here is can I relate SOPs and all the GXPs to the statement given by a Scottish philosopher? People are robotized and robots are humanized. Isn't this true for the present day? That we try to make the robots human-like, but at the same time, we are trying to make the people robotized. By creating so many SOPs and GXPs, we are trying to robotize the people, and this is causing what? The havoc which is coming up is that it becomes extremely difficult for us to undergo inventions. We become so much of a copybook styles, and we forget the inventions, and consequently lose the habit of taking the exertion for the new inventions. So we just try to follow someone's SOP, or we create some SOPs and push it to the next level of people or the subordinates to follow it. And therefore, we forget the innovative practices, and that is what is happening in India. When I was actually studying, means almost 15-20 years back, when I was having a talk with a engineering college professor, he said our students do not go for masters. And I said, why? He said industries do not provide job opportunities to the masters. The reason is that they are more better thinkers, and we don't want thinkers. We want followers. And the reason now what is coming out, the output now what is coming out is that we are not redesigning our products so often as we find with the other countries, because we don't have the pool of people ready to do any innovation. We have pushed them into a SOP based work. Same thing is happening for our toxicity studies projects also. And therefore, we need to create smart SOPs which are flexible, also to a certain extent, keeping the purpose of the studies proper. And also, there should be an inclusion of non-GLP studies also into the such activities where safety of a pharmaceutical is of prime importance, because it can affect the millions of lives in this world. So slowly we are trying to modify ourselves. Otherwise, if we don't modify ourselves, we'll go back to the 16th century or 17th century. Another question I would like to put forward is, why do we need preclinical studies? Obviously, the need for it is for predicting the toxicity at the early stage of, not drug toxicity, drug development. So predicting toxicity at the early stage of drug development, and based on this, the drugs can be rejected at the early stage, because as we know in the drug development phase, as we go ahead above and above stages, that is from preclinical, advanced preclinical to phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, as we go up, the cost of the study increases. And if we come to know that at phase 3 the drug is toxic and we have to stop these studies, the cost and the human life which is getting affected both has immense creates immense problems. Even sometimes the drugs which are withdrawn from the market, say for example Vioxx is a classical example, which was withdrawn from the market after almost 4 to 6 years in the clinical use. So predicting toxicity at early stage is of immense importance. And not only that, it is also helpful in designing the forthcoming studies. That is how the acute toxicity studies were performed and the data obtained in the acute toxicity studies will be helping in designing the subacute toxicity studies, which will be helpful in defining the chronic studies, and so on. So each observations we get from the preclinical studies has to be transformed into some modifications into the next protocols. It's not a copybook style like that you have to do the acute toxicity study as per the OECD guidelines, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No. OECD guidelines are guidelines and you need to modify yourself according to your specific requirements. And that's why I put forward the first line in the first slide about the smart SOPs. And smart SOPs has to be created at a very early stage of the drug development. And there has to be provision of modification at subsequent stages also. The ultimate goals of preclinical studies are basically to accurately model in animals the desired biological effect of a drug in order to predict treatment outcome in patients. So one is the efficacy studies that we do, and it's translation of the biological effects what we are observing in the animals to the patients. That is important. The translation is the bottleneck. We find a very effective drug in the animals. Ultimately, it doesn't get translated into the humans. Same way, for the safety studies, we require to identify and characterize all toxicities associated with a drug in order to predict adverse events in people for informed risk assessment. Now, that means we are required to define or characterize each and every small level also toxicities in the preclinical studies, so that during the clinical trials, the safety of the patient is taken into consideration properly. And at the same time, the designing of the phase trials are such that this toxicities becomes more better identifiable in the clinical trials. Now, the various defined toxicity studies and the defined safety studies in the various guidelines, including the OECD guidelines, there are developing challenges. Say, one of the challenges which every one of us face is a constant demand for reduced animal usage. We have modified acute toxicity studies. We are also modifying now the subacute toxicity studies, chronic studies. Every studies now are getting modified. More and more number of in vitro studies are getting introduced. And accordingly, we need to define our translational capacities. That is defining how the results coming from a cell level or an enzyme level or a test tube level studies, how can we transfer it to the humans? Now this translation of the animal data to the humans is becoming a very hot topic of the present day, and lots of newer technologies which are being now pushed in, and we will soon see a sudden change in the various guidelines coming up, because the two pressures are very, very high. One, animal usage reduction coming from the various agencies like including PETA is forcing to so extensively to the Western world as well as now to the India also in reduction of the animal usage. Secondly, there are so many reports coming up that the toxicity was not identified in the animal studies, but is getting identified in human studies. Why so? That means there is some question mark to the animal studies defined. Thirdly, nobody wants to wait for 2-3 years for doing the toxicity studies and then finding out that this drug is useless and then go for the next step. So the speed of the study is now becoming another challenge. Who is fast in putting the drug first? And in this race, the one who is able to complete all of the requirements, regulatory requirements faster, is the winner. And as we know, a single day or a single hour difference also matters a lot to a pharmaceutical company. Now, many of the guidelines are along with this, there are special cases which are coming up nowadays in a larger context, and where the present guidelines are facing difficulties to incorporate into. Some of these guidelines have been addressed at certain levels, some still requires to be addressed. So for example, there is increased number of biosimilars and cell-based products. These are specialized cases, and how can we go for specific designs for this studies? Because it may be a one-time dosing, or it may be like a gene therapy based administration. So how to determine the toxicity of such agents, and should we go for the classical toxicology panels of the study? The question mark remains, because so much of variations comes in that even the product development phases are also quite different, and all the studies which have been put forward at the different guideline levels are based on the small molecules, are for the small molecules. And so ICH guidelines is also rapidly changing according to the cell-based products, and some of the guidelines have already been put forward by the ICH, safety guidelines. Similarly, oncology products face a big problem because they are already toxic in nature and we know about their toxicities. Can we go for a same type of dosings as we go for a simple type of other small molecules? Obviously, no, because there are specific and well-defined levels of toxicities of these substances. We know their toxicity, and still we want to do it again and spend time on it again and again. That is not a right approach. So we need some simpler, faster, and still better predictable methods for these products. Radiopharmaceuticals is also now a growing branch. We are using more and more amount of radiopharmaceuticals, not only for cancer chemotherapies, but also for diagnostic purposes. Microdoses are...
Hello.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Kindly show your slide in slideshow mode
Okay.
as per chat box message.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
So there are specific demands coming for radiopharmaceuticals also, because how much number of repeated dosing studies to be done with the radiopharmaceuticals? So again, ICH guidelines are coming forward to change this and give us specific guidance for this radiopharmaceuticals. And one more thing which is now being questioned is the combination toxicity studies, because a large number of drugs are now being clinically used in combinations. And most of the toxicities are done in a separate level. So a simple example is ampicillin cloxacillin combination used for years. We might have a specific data for ampicillin, we might have a specific data for cloxacillin, but we do not know what happens when these two are combined. And at a clinical level, we immediately mix it and try to give it to the patients. Now, this needs to be studied now at an early stage, because there are lots of irrational but we have never studied together for the safety studies before putting it into the market. There are so many problems coming up with the type of products getting changed, and therefore ICH has adopted many of the guidelines of the OECD, but is now bringing in and creating its own guidelines from the other references also, other places also, other researches also. And still it is needing to be improved upon. And many more challenges are yet to come, and we need to improve upon further. Now, one more basic question one has to address first is safety absolute or relative? The aim of a toxicity study is never to classify a substance as safe and unsafe. Our aim of the studies are just to decrease the probability of causing harm due to drugs. And therefore, at every stage, we have to look into the benefit risk ratio. And as we know, no drug is 100% safe. At the same time, safety level acceptance limit for OTC products and anti-cancer drugs are quite different. It's a simple paracetamol tablet. If it is going to cause some carcinogenic activity, suppose if you find that is a much bigger problem than an anti-cancer drug causing carcinogenic activities, because that is known that these agents are going to produce this toxicity. So safety level acceptance limits change for product to product. It is something like the safety we look for, in a normal flight. Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir, you can continue.
Okay. This safety level in a normal flight and a safety level in a fighter plane, their limits are different. Same thing happens for our drugs also. So defining whether drug is safe or unsafe is not to be decided just from the test. It has to be decided from the level of product. So before we ensure a safety of pharmaceuticals, we need to answer three fundamental questions. One, what toxicity tests are needed for the substance? What tests have been performed already and how well they have been done? That's where our GLP and OECD guidelines and all those guidelines comes to play. But what toxicities are needed for the substance? This has to be decided much earlier. We cannot think of just as a normal robotic way that you start with an acute toxicity, you go for then subacute, then for chronic, then for reproductive toxicity, then for teratogenicity, and so on and so and so on. So we need to prioritize specifically for a specific product. And the informations what we are getting from this data associated with the databases and the other informations we get from the bioinformatics tool, does that permit the assessment of human health hazards? Now this question is now a big question, and if this is answered, probability the translation of the animal data to the human translation will be answered in a better way. This slide is just of our 2011 data, and if you see, during the span of 5 years, since 2006 to 11, 79 drug candidates were dropped in the clinical trials. That means they have cleared the preclinical animal toxicity and they were found safe in the preclinical stage, but in the clinical they were found to have toxicity. So why did we miss, or what did we miss in the preclinical study? We do a lot of hepatotoxicity and nervous toxicity and cardiovascular toxicity studies during the preclinical toxicity, but still we missed. And even the preclinical studies missed many of them. And almost 47 drugs were withdrawn from the market during the 5 years. Now, the same case in 2011 to 2016, if I go, the situation remains the same, and various toxicities, hepatotoxicity, hematological, cardiovascular, we do specific toxicity on reproductive system, we do toxicity on various neurological studies, carcinogenicity studies, but still we miss, and all of these products were in the market and then withdrawn from the market. So where are we missing? Are the studies done adequate? Are we hiding something? Is the GLP being followed properly? Or one more question is that are the studies sufficient enough? And that is the basic question where I'm trying to put my stress on. The percentage of failures of the drugs that crossed the preclinical and clinical trials. See, what we find is 88 were failed and 12 passed during the preclinical trials. Clinical also the similar results. So, if these failures had been prevented, then what will be the number of clinical trials status? So this is just an hypothetical value that is being put forward, that we would have got a status of 44 to 56 in the clinical trials. So if these failures had been prevented, and you see 88% failures in the clinical and preclinical, and this is somewhere which is eye-opener. Another example, sibutramine, that was originally developed by Knoll Pharmaceuticals as an appetite suppressant. And this was for the treatment of obesity. And it was recalled in USA in 2010. So it was introduced in 97 something. And after 13 years, it was withdrawn. And sibutramine is a non-selective inhibitor that acts by inhibiting the reuptake of 3 monoamine neurotransmitters. Means it blocks the uptake of serotonin, dopamine, as well as norepinephrine. Now, why did this drug fail? And after so many years of it, it was withdrawn from the market. If you look at the specific reason for it, the sibutramine was tested for primary targets, that is serotonin transporter, dopamine transporter, norepinephrine transporter. And also its metabolism was tested and it was found to be working through, means was getting metabolized by 2B6, 2C19 and 2B6 enzymes. So this was identified in the preclinical and the clinical studies, but we didn't look into the genetic variations that are likely to be possible, and no animal studies are looking into these genetic variations which are present in the human beings. So what happened was there was certain SNP variations, and because of this drug was not getting metabolized properly by this actual targets and resulting into increased concentration of sibutramine. And instead of working on this transporter, now sibutramine at a higher concentration was working on alpha 2b adrenergic receptors. Now, if I say that we were not able to study the SNPs or genetic variations in the animals, but we obviously do lots of clinical preclinical studies at much higher dose than the clinically used doses. And at that stage, we could have identified the problems like excessive norepinephrine release and cardiovascular toxicity at a higher dose. So we missed it, and ultimately, many of the cardiovascular deaths happened because of sibutramine. And finally, in 2010, it was withdrawn from the market. So there were provisions in the toxicological profiling of the drug. The studies were done, the data were available, but the interpretation of the data was not done sufficiently, and we missed this toxicity and resulted into a good number of losses in the human life, and as well as there was a huge impact on the company itself and the financial burden that company had to suffer because of this toxicity. So that means our interpretation of the data also needs to be changed. Now again, this is another presentation or another way of putting forward what I am trying to say. And this, I got it from a very recent article from the Natures, that initially when we start our studies with a particular drug, we are so much optimistic that we bring out a range of therapeutic index so wide. So we consider that the drug is extremely safe drug because its target potency and off-target potencies are quite different, and the dose requirement is very high. But then we go for the in vitro toxicological safety studies. What we observe is that this range is getting reduced. Then with animal safety, this range is getting reduced. Now, this major difference is almost 4 to 5 times reduction in the therapeutic index of the drug comes just because of the animal safety studies. So animal safety studies are important. Unquestionably, they are important. They reduce a lot of overthinking about the drug. That is, normally when a company puts in a new drug, it always tries to tell that this is a very, very safe drug. But it is these animal safety studies that puts a first break on that, telling that it's not so safe as expected. The difference at the animal safety and human safety endpoints that has been observed is very small change, but still this change is important. And this is where improvement what we are finding with time, with the different studies, that is where I would say that this GLP and OECD guidelines has succeeded. So at one side, I'm talking about the unsuccess stories of the OECD of these guidelines and these studies. At the same time, there is a safety component also. We need to balance this too. That is what is my aim in telling all this. And if we can think of that, if this differences, if we are able to predict also here, then the animal safety studies would become more predictable. Now, what should be the next criteria? How are panel of toxicological studies to be thought of? First is in the present day, I'm not talking of what we were doing earlier, but in the present day, what we require is a pre-prediction of the toxicities. Pre-prediction of the toxicity, I mean, now that there are extremely large number of databases available. And there are softwares available similar to QSAR. There is also QSPR and such other prediction tools, bioinformatic tools which are available. Using that tools, we need to do a pre-prediction of the toxicities. Identify the probable causes of toxicity. Even there are some developments like developing a virtual cell, and where the entire panel of enzymes and the biochemical pathways are incorporated into that virtual cell. And if I say that one particular enzyme is inhibited by 2%, what is the cascading effects on the other biochemical processes of the cell? It can predict that. So such virtual tools are now coming up, and we need to use them at the very early stage of the drug development. Probably even before we synthesize a drug. And once we come to know that it might be having a probable cardiotoxicity or a renotoxicity also. So based on that, we can also undergo a very parallel in vitro toxicity studies, whether they are based on the OECD guidelines or such guidelines or not. We need to add up. Say, for example, one of the issue came up with iron preparation, nano iron emulsions to be injected IV. So that product, if had to be put into the market, there were issues with that the iron is already present in the humans, and to determine what is the level of iron changes that is happening was extremely getting difficult. Basic measurement of the plasma level of iron, it is fine, it is easy to do it. But what will be the impact of this iron on the kidney concentrations or kidney levels of the iron, on the liver levels of the iron? And that also not in the kidney, but into a specific hepatocytes or into the stellate cells. So at that level of measurement, one has to go for such products, even though it's a very simple iron preparation product. And this can be done only in the in vitro toxicity studies only. Then many of the companies are also thinking of and putting stress on non-GLP studies. So before doing all these regulatory studies, if we can go for a specific mechanistic based GLP studies, non-GLP studies, identify the probable toxicities much before, and then design the regulatory toxicity studies which are GLP based. So just jumping onto this acute toxicity is not a right path now. Instead, if we add these 3 steps at the beginning itself, this can help in defining the toxicities much early, and that will help in designing this acute toxicity studies as well as the subsequent studies. So for example, in the acute toxicity studies, we normally, many of the people think just on the LD50 determination or LD10 or LD20 or LD80, whatever you want to put it forward. But the problem is much beyond LD50. We need to answer that what are the changes observed in the behavior of the animals, in the food and water intake of the animals. We do record them, we do show it in the data, but we never analyze it to a sufficient extent. We just say that the water intake was reduced or food intake was reduced or something like that. But we never analyze it at the initial stage. Why it was happened, whether it was because of the gastric toxicity, whether it was affecting at the CNS level and therefore it was there, or it was causing very serious inflammations in the liver and because of which it was causing the effect on the food and water intake. If that is so, I do a gross morphology of that organs, and in the gross morphology, what I have to look at, whether it was the liver involved, whether it was the stomach involved. So just analyzing each data with respect to why it has happened. And this should come from right from the acute toxicity data itself. And based on that, if our gross morphology or even the histological sectioning, nobody stops us in telling that you do not go for histological examination of the liver in the acute toxicity studies. We can go ahead with that. That is an additional parameter one can think of if it is required. And that is also now getting put forward into the guidelines also. Also, based on this acute toxicity, we are already the guidelines mention about defining the doses for the subacute and chronic studies based on the acute toxicity study data. Fine. But beyond that, each parameters like the biochemical parameters of the liver, what we include is say SGPT, SGOT, etc., etc. But can we add something more to identify further? Can we make a histological sectioning more specific instead of just looking it for hematoxylin eosin stain? We can go still further for the fibrosis and other stainings also. So what next to be put into the profile for the subacute chronic toxicity, etc.? That has to be defined from the earlier study. So each study defines the design of the next study. Instead of putting the entire protocol ready, one has to be flexible and do it in a one-by-one step method only. To hasten and do it fast, we cannot combine the studies together. And while analyzing the study data, one should consider the various aspects, and probably this must have been discussed or will be getting discussed in these presentations. How much stress we are putting onto the animals and what is its impact on the data? What was the dose volume you are pushing in to the animals? very simple. There are guidelines that not more than this, but sometimes especially for the herbal drugs or for the drugs like to be given by IV infusions, then there are various animal species characteristics, and I'm very sure that each design considers this very prior way. Similarly, type of control used and performance of the control animals in the study, both positive and negative controls and the recovery group, and all this are now put in the OECD guidelines and every other guidelines. But analyzing those data with respect to this control animals, this is important. Again, the number of animals used has been specified in the toxicity, means in all these guidelines, but it can be further increased. We can go still higher into that. And proper statistical designing should be incorporated. If you find that 10 animals per group is not sufficient, it will be increased to 12 or 15 if you find using the statistical tool that this is required. These species and strains of the animals used, obviously, these are causing a good amount of changes in the result data. And each species and strains, there are some historical data available, and historical data from the suppliers need to be taken into consideration before analyzing our data. In same way, since GLP expects that you need to have your animal facility data records very clear and need to have a proper historical data, our own control data for the past studies done has its effect. We need to have that in the ready hand, and we need to use it for the analysis of the data. And for both GLP and non-GLP studies, based on that, we need to carry out studies specific to the predicted topic. So if I find that the renal toxicity is very likely to have, is the likely possibility for this drugs or this group of drugs, I need to include the specific renal toxicity studies additional to the classical regulatory studies. Now, this is just an example I'm putting forward for these various stress conditions that is impacting the study. Simply the stress which is affected by nutrition, which is affecting the circulating blood vessels, and it has an impact on various things like body weight, food consumption, eosinophil counts, lymphocyte counts, organ weight changes, organ histology. All of these parameters are significantly getting affected by the stress itself. Now what we do is we add a positive and a negative control and see that, consider or assume that the same stress would have been given to the control animals. And therefore we can nullify the stress. But it is not always so, because sometimes there is a differential in aspects in the treatment with respect, say for example, the phlebotomy caused by the phlebotomy done to the animals, that is causing, or the IV injections given to the animals, that is causing necrotization of the tissue, and which is causing an additional stress to the animals, which is not going to happen in a control animals. So at one side, we find out that there is a tissue necrosis at the site of injection. At the same time, we forget that this pain which has been caused to the animals is going to affect the various other parameters, and that is going to change the toxicity profile of the drug. Similarly, the stresses could be as simple as cage changing, food restrictions, fasting, the social structures, how we have grouped the animals, the exercises the animals are expected to do, the transportation of the animals from one place to the others, handling effects of the test articles, intercurrent diseases. All of this has an impact on the routine toxicity studies, and this needs to be addressed before analyzing the data. Now, the present situation comes up that we need to create a model to improve our output from the preclinical studies. So, based on the QSAR and other studies, we are creating the hypothesis at the early stage. Based on that, we are creating the specific studies. Also, we are replacing initially to the in vitro studies for the in vivo studies. And if we can do this, at least we can address two issues. One, we can reduce the time of the study, total time requirement. Secondly, we can also reduce the animal usage. But at the present stage, we cannot entirely replace in vivo studies by in vitro studies. We don't have that much sufficient strong databases where we can transfer all the in vitro requirements, means all the in vitro results to the in vivo results. So, so this still can be done to at least understand that these are the possible toxicities, and this then can be transferred for designing properly the in vitro or in vivo studies. At least doing an extra in vitro studies additionally, we are not increasing the time and resources, but we are just trying to reduce the burden on the clinical trials. And that is a much bigger cost we are saving. Also, we need to go back and forth. It's not a one-sided process that is from basic science to clinical research to clinical medicine. Though we call it as bench to bedside to community, but there is always a possibility to come back to the basic science and then go back for the clinical research and clinical medicine. Now, this cycle goes on and goes on, even for a drug which is available into the market since last 50, 60 years. Even for a drug like metformin, many of the preclinical studies are going on, and then it is being brought to the clinical research. Many phase 3 clinical trials are being conducted for metformin also. So this cycle goes on, and this has to go on. Then only the safeties and the efficacy of a drug can be ascertained and can be used for, drug can be used with a better analysis and better output. So most of these things I have already discussed, but I would put a stress on that the animal toxicity data, who are very, very important and very needed to be done, we need to identify the positive predictor value and the negative predictor value for each of the studies we do. Say, for example, I am getting, say, a hepatotoxicity in the toxicity studies. In the subacute toxicity studies, I am able to find that the drug produces toxicity on the liver, it increases the SGOT, SGPT levels, and it causes significant hepatotoxicity at a higher dose. Now, is this same going to happen into the humans? If it is same going to happen, I would say that it has a positive predictor value. If it is not getting found in the humans, then its predictive value will be less. Similarly, for the negative predictor value, that is, though I am not finding a specific changes in the levels of SGOT, SGPT values, but in the humans I am able to find some liver toxicity. In that cases, I need to question my animal research. Now, lastly, I would like to put forward one thing, that before we go ahead for actual animals-based studies, one should go through the lots of literature available with respect to the databases and the softwares which are made available. Now, these are some of the examples of the various databases which are used for predicting the toxicities at the very early stage. And all these toxicities to be analyzed, and based on the various machine learning tools, these databases are becoming more stronger and more powerful in predicting the toxicities, and this can help in designing the toxicity studies in a better way. And if you see, there are so many databases coming up, and various aspects with respect to chemistry, with respect to even toxicological data, nanomaterial toxicities, animal toxicity data, all of these are now coming up, and this all databases need to be studied before initiating any of these studies, because as we know, these studies are extremely costly, and this cost intensive studies, if we predict the drug's efficacy and toxicity much early, it would be of great benefit in hastening the speed in bringing the drug to the market. So there are various merits to this in silico methods which need to be included into the protocol for a pharmaceutical drug development. And the merits are that with day by day, time by time, they are improving, and their predictability is improving. And these are based on the practical and evidence-based. So their output and predictability is high. So many of the drugs were found to be toxic and been removed from the study panel much early. But this data are entered into the databases. And so the databases has become so rich now that almost 30,000, 50,000 chemical databases are there with various toxicities known for it. And using this learning artificial intelligence and machine learning tools, we are now predicting it much better. And as we know, machine learning is coming into our day-to-day life with the involvement of different gadgets which are now put forward like Alexa and others. So in everyday life, it has entered, and the same thing is now going to enter into our profession too. And therefore, we need to learn all these programmings and softwares, and we cannot remain out of it. We cannot just learn to be skillful in one thing and forget the other things. We need to be a multitasking person. And then only we can face the challenges which are forthcoming. So this will be good. And that's all I have for the day. I thank you all for patient listening. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful session and sharing your valuable knowledge on designing of toxicology studies and for pharmaceuticals and data interpretation. Now there are a few questions from the participants. First question is there from Mr. Rushikesh Velis. Is there any future scope for machine learning and artificial intelligence in the toxicological studies?
Obviously, yes, there are so much of there. And if we say all of these databases and the softwares which are coming up, which I have mentioned already, they are now predicting to such a large level that before the drug is synthesized, we predict that so and so structures are going to be toxic, and they are never synthesized also. So unfortunately, none of the pharmacist people are expert in programming, and we need to combine our expertise from of pharma with such softwares like Python and machine learning softwares. Then we have a very good career in toxicological discoveries.
Whether different animal species can use for acute and chronic toxicity study of a drug.
Okay. So there are different animal species which are already being described in the OECD guidelines. Beyond that, in special conditions, yes, we can go for different animal species. But for that you need to specify the need, why you need it. So one rodent and one non-rodent has been prescribed. A non-rodent could be anything from rabbits to dogs or monkeys also. So it depends on drug to drug whether which animal species to be used. Second question is, can molecular toxicity studies help to get better extrapolation of preclinical data to clinical data? Yes, molecular biology, molecular toxicology can help in identifying the mechanistic aspects of the toxicity, and even at low dose studies in the phase 1 trials, this can be used for determining the toxicity at a when small changes in the biomarker levels can be identified in the first phase 1. So molecular toxicology has its advantage. One thing we should be careful in extrapolating the data from in vitro studies to the main study is that similar mechanism should exist in the humans. That is, when I am talking about that specific enzyme is getting inhibited and that results into so and so toxicity. But if this enzyme is present in what level in the humans, if I know, then the prediction or extrapolation becomes more better. So it depends on what type of study you have undergone. Now, third question is, if the toxicity data for particular plant is already available in literature, can we take that data or we have to repeat the same in our lab? Suppose you are doing it for, I'm not knowing the purpose for which it is being done. You are asking, it is just for the research purpose and you are just trying to use it for lab purpose, you need not do it. If you are doing for regulatory aspects, for the product development and then marketing and applying to the regulatory bodies, in that cases, literature data can help if the drug is already in market. If not in market, you will have to get the details about how it was done, when it was done, whether it was done according to the GLP or not, that you need to put forward. Then only you can use it for regulatory submissions. For routine understanding and your routine preclinical studies, you need not go for doing it again. I hope I have answered the questions.
Yes, sir. It is well answered, and I think we can say in detail. The things are. It's like a nutshell. You've given everything, every aspects very clearly. Even we can say what are the loophole of the current guidance and what can be the future guidance can be there. That both the matter has been like well covered by you, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for sparing almost we can say 1 hour and 20 minutes we are with you, and that's a long time, and that is a really we can say detailed presentation made by you. Thank you. So I think anything we can like now leave the meeting. So sir, we will take a leave from you, sir. Thank you. We'll meet sometime at institute when these things will be normal. We'll invite you here. Okay, sir. Bye, sir.